Africa has a voice, and that voice is Channel Africa. It keeps you in motion, speaking, singing, questioning, rising. Wake up with Rise and Shine 6 till 9. Peter and Asanda as they bring you breaking news, sharp analysis, and the voices that shape the day. At mid-morning, we get on the move with Palisa and Benjamin, digging into the African lifestyle, people, and the things that make Africa smile. 12 till 1, Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, getting in-depth, powerful stories, and the perspective you won't hear anywhere else. The Upside, 1 till 4, live and real, with Tebogo Lepoleni and Matseko Musito. Tamengo Bene talks money, Africa in business, 4 till 5 p.m. 5 till 6, we put on a little bit more color. Vue d'Afrique, with Joël Muteba. We go to East and Central Africa and find
It's exactly 2100 Central African time. My name is Innocent Semosa. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective. We're coming to you live from our studios in Johannesburg, South Africa. I must say that it was a little bit cold in the afternoon, but it's opening up on a very just easy evening in Johannesburg, South Africa. This is Africa World Hour. Of course, I'm in for Tsepiso. She's back with you next week. All right, top stories that made headlines today. The Israeli military's intense air and ground offensive is continuing in Gaza's central city of Deir al-Balah, an area previously spread large scales construction during the war. The tertiary, of course, civil defense agency says at least 2 people have been killed there today, along with 13 others here Gaza City. But of course, Britain's Foreign Secretary David Lammy has said he's appealed the sickened by the scenes in Gaza. Juliet Tauma from the UN Refugee Agency says the conditions are dire.
Gaza is a hell on earth. Our own staff at UNRWA are fainting while on duty due to hunger and exhaustion. The system that's been put in place, that's supported by both the governments of Israel and the United States, is against the humanitarian principle and is totally unnecessary.
Political activists in Kenya says the young demonstrators who have frequently taken to the streets in recent months to protest myriad issues, including political police brutality, are just being used to send a warning to opposition parties in the country. This after terrorism-related charges against renowned Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi have been dropped. However, Mwangi will now face prosecution for possession of ammunition without a valid firearm certification. A member of Kenyan Parliament, Maxwell D. Karuki.
The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions dropped the terrorism charges because of the outcry. Everybody was up in arms. The people can see what the government is up to. And after so much noise, they decided to reduce the charges. Now, there is a group of protesters that were arrested after the July 7th protest. Majority of them are young people, what we call the Gen Zs. Now, those boys and girls, literally kids on that one, and I don't think they will find something, but I think it's a tactic to try and intimidate Kenyans whenever they want to rise and criticize the government.
A court in Mali has rejected an appeal by Barrick Mining to release 4 employees arrested last November. This is the latest development in a long-running standoff between the Canadian firm and the Mali government over taxes and ownership of mining operations in the country.
The appeal by Barrick Mining, which has dismissed the allegations against the 4 local employees as baseless, was determined by Judge Samba Sarr to be unfounded. The company says its employees face charges including money laundering and violation of other regulations. Barrick owns 80% of the Lulukunkoto mining complex in Mali, and the government owns the rest. Operations have been suspended there since mid-January.
The National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, in South Africa says it will take its appeal against the acquittal of Nigerian tele-evangelist Timothy Omotoso to the Supreme Court of Appeal. The state was dealt another blow today when its application was for clarification of facts on the Omotoso judgment was dismissed by the Gqeberha High Court in the Eastern Cape province. Now, Omotoso and his co-accused Lusanda Sulani and Zuki Swasito were facing a striking of charges including racketeering, human trafficking and rape, but were acquitted on all the charges in April in a judgment delivered by Judge Alma Skuman. NPA spokesperson Mtunzi Manga says they will file their application to the Supreme Court of Appeal within 21 days.
We will proceed to finalize the drafting of the questions of law for her to reserve them for consideration by the Supreme Court of Appeal. We will do that before the end of the week, hopefully. If necessary, we'll also prepare a coronation application to explain the delay in filing the request.
Now, South Africa's Department of Health is in the Gauteng province says plans are underway to digitize a minimum of 800 million patients' records across all 37 hospitals in the province. It says the project was started successfully at the Chris Hani Baragwana Academic Hospital in Soweto, where 800,000 patients filed were digitized. Foreign nationals, both undocumented and documented, account for the greatest number of patients in Gauteng's public health care. But of course, the initial aims to make patients' records more accessible and easier to manage while ensuring compliance with privacy and security standards. The department's acting chief operation officer, Percy Selebe.
We are reducing the risks of lost or misplaced files, as we know that as we lose files, we stand a risk of being litigated. We want to streamline hospital administration and reduce waiting times.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Now, analysts have condemned, or should I say commended, the Pan-African Parliament's adoption of the African Union theme for 2025. The fifth ordinary sitting of the sixth Parliament of the Pan-African Parliament is underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. It is hosted under the theme Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through repatriation. Channel Africa's Nhlanhla Mahlangu spoke to Leslie Low van der Van, senior advisor at International Crisis Group, on the sidelines of the sitting.
I think it was important that the ambassador of Angola to the African Union was here representing the member states, the Permanent Representatives Committee, who he chairs because Angola is chairing the African Union for 2025. And I think he made a strong contribution, also linking the theme of the year, Justice for Africans through reparations, together with, specifically focusing on the PAP, its budget, its future, I think, because he also looked forward to what should happen next year, a new election for a new PAP bureau. There's been a lot of, let's say, up and downs with the PAP in terms of its leadership. So I think the fact that the Permanent Representatives Committee, the ambassadors in Addis, are linking more strongly with the PAP is a good thing. Although it's a pity that the commission chairperson wasn't here, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf. He was elected in February. It was a great opportunity for him also to come and speak to the PAP member states. So he wasn't here. He didn't even speak virtually. So that was a bit of a disappointment. But from the member state, from the chair of the year, Angola, I think that was important that Angola was here, and then Tandi Moraka from South Africa's Deputy Minister of International Relations was here, and she also actually spoke quite a bit about the theme of the year, which I think is quite unusual because previous themes of the African Union sometimes just go completely unnoticed, education, youth, etc. This theme really seemed to have caught on and has become something to mobilize around. Obviously, she spoke about the G20, trying to, also link Africa's asks in terms of reform of the international financial system, but also UN Security Council reform. This theme seems to have been very useful to link the idea of a greater voice for Africa in international affairs and, for example, in the G20. So altogether, it was a good opening, but I think the African Union Commission should have been more present.
Speaking of the Deputy Minister of International Relations, Tandi Morake, she also announced a visa waiver for MPs beginning in October. What did you make of that?
Yes, that was quite surprising, I thought, because that's a very controversial issue. And it seems as if, MPs have really struggled to get visas, and especially if they overstay their visas by a couple of days even, they've had huge difficulties. So she actually announced there would be a visa waiver from 1 October for PAP MPs from all African countries, which is really quite unusual. I mean, South Africa, as the host of the Pan-African Parliament, really has shown also ups and downs in terms of its support, because the host country agreement, which is very important for the PAP, is still being postponed. And we heard again yesterday about the host country agreement. I was actually surprised. I thought that all of this had been finalized, which makes it much easier for, let's say, staff of the Pan-African Parliament, but also NEPAD, APRM, all these AU organs that are based in South Africa need a host country agreement so that they, for example, are exempt from certain things, certain tax obligations. They can be considered as diplomats when they are in South Africa. So I think things perhaps are picking up again, and this is a very good way of South Africa to show, listen, we are committed also to Pan-African Parliament, because there was a time when we thought, there was a lot of euphoria, a lot of excitement. It is still an amazing sort of innovation compared to the OAU, the Pan-African Parliament. It didn't exist before, and there was a lot of enthusiasm that the Malabo Protocol would be ratified and that the PAP would get real legislative power. Now, that hasn't happened. We heard about that again here at the opening and so on. So the enthusiasm, the hope of the early 2000s when the PAP was created waned a bit, and maybe now, we'll see a new dynamic. Also from a new commitment from South Africans' side. But I'm a bit worried that, as I say, here we are opening. It's the only session of the PAP so far in 2025. New AU Commission, and the chairperson isn't here. The Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security did travel to Midrand to attend last week the meeting of the Peace and Security Council and the Pan-African Parliament, but now he was supposed to also speak virtually on a session on peace and security and governance, but there was a hiccup or a delay. So all in all, one has to be realistic that we're not there yet where there is a new dynamic with the PAP.
You have it. That was Lo Vaudran, Senior Advisor at International Crisis Group. She was speaking to Dladla Mahlangu at the Pan-African Parliament that is currently underway in Midrand, Johannesburg, South Africa. All right, on to this now. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to deepen, with aid organizations like Action for Humanity sounding the alarm over the recent forced evacuations in Deir al-Balah. Displacement camps operated by the organization have come under threat, forcing families, many already displaced multiple times, to flee once again. We are now joined by Charles Lowley, Director of Communication and Advisory, or should I say Advocacy, at Action for Humanity, for an update. Charles, thank you so much for making the time. Welcome to Channel Africa. Let me perhaps begin by asking you, can you paint the picture for us in terms of the current situation on the ground, particularly around the Al Camp 3, 4 and 5?
Yeah, so unfortunately what we're seeing on the ground is not a humanitarian failure. It's a deliberate, systematic starvation. We're seeing over 500,000 people in Gaza now in IPC Phase 5 famine conditions, which are the worst possible, and the UN Food Security Monitor has called this the worst food crisis in the history, and that includes over nearly 6,000 children diagnosed with acute malnutrition in just this 1 month. With regards to the situation with Action for Humanity's displacement camps, we run numerous displacement camps. We call them Hope camps, and 3 of those are in the area of Deir al-Balah, which was covered by this evacuation order yesterday and the escalation in violence. And this is the first time since October 2023 that this area of Gaza, Deir al-Balah, has been covered by an evacuation order. So that's largely in part why NGOs like Action for Humanity have displacement camps here, because it was considered as safe as anywhere could be in Gaza. And now, unfortunately, 3 of those camps have been affected. 1 has been completely emptied. Another remains partially occupied by displaced people. It did remain partially occupied as of Sunday, but has now been fully vacated under extreme duress. And yesterday tanks advanced to the entrance of this camp on Al Baraka Street, which is the main access point to this camp. And another camp, there are a few families that have that were there and have now evacuated. Most all the women and children have evacuated from this camp. And we're seeing nearby buildings, including humanitarian offices and warehouses, having been bombed, and communications are severely limited. But we're doing everything possible to both protect people and humanitarian infrastructure.
Yeah, you have confirmed that the Camp 4 and 5 have now been fully vacated. Are you able to explain how were these evacuations carried out and the conditions like for the families who fled?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately, so how this came about, we got the evacuation orders yesterday morning and did all we could to get everyone to safety, and luckily we were able to do that in these camps. The conditions are as good as a displacement camp can be. Sadly, that people live in what we would call informal shelter, but was probably more commonly known as tents, tarpaulin. We as an NGO do try and provide access to food, to healthcare, to clean water, and psychosocial support for especially the children who are undergoing a lot of trauma. But it's everywhere around Gaza now we're seeing destruction, homes destroyed. Almost the entire population has been displaced at least once. One of our local staff in Gaza, Hanya, she's been displaced multiple times, and she recently shared her story with the BBC here in the UK, and she spoke about the trauma of fleeing at night under bombardment and the impossibility of trying to find safety in it when nowhere is safe and you're unable to leave Gaza.
Yeah, Charles, we understand that women and children from Camp 3 have also been moved. What's the latest with regards to their safety and their current whereabouts? Are they safe?
Yeah, I mean, it's just anywhere outside of evacuation zone. It's really hard to judge because the phone networks are being routinely cut off. So it's very difficult for us to keep in contact with everyone. So it's
But
as
so
far
far,
as we know,
what are you hearing on the ground?
Well, so today alone, at least 60 people have been killed in the last 24 hours. And the humanitarian situation is deteriorating rapidly. We're seeing it with the healthcare partners we work with and work alongside. The amount of people being admitted and sadly dying due to hunger, due to starvation, is growing by the day. I think there's a misconception that the conditions in Gaza are about the same as it has been throughout this near 2-year conflict. But the reality is, especially since March, when Israel blocked aid for 3 months and then weaponized it with the formation of the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the humanitarian conditions have deteriorated worse than ever before. Starvation is rampant. The destruction of buildings is endemic. The access to healthcare is deteriorating. It really is the worst it has ever been. And in my long career as working in humanitarian aid, it's the worst I've ever seen.
Yeah, devastating indeed. You've mentioned that you have a challenge of, getting the information on the ground. But what are some of the key challenges your team are facing right now in trying to maintain humanitarian support under these circumstances? I'm asking because I know that there are those obstacles, but what are some of those key challenges that you're facing?
So the first one would be getting aid into Gaza. Israel have a very tight control and are only letting aid in via the GHF. And as I'm sure you've seen, most of these GHF aid distributions, which are backed by Israel and the US, end in multiple civilians getting killed. We've seen reports of people being fired upon for collecting aid. So actually getting aid in is really difficult. So that means the aid that we do that is accessible inside Gaza, that can be sourced inside Gaza, the price is astronomical due to insane levels of demand, but such minimal supplies. We as an aid agency are targets. We're seeing aid workers, humanitarian infrastructure being bombed, being killed routinely. It's not safe for anyone to be in Gaza, and aid workers, like journalists, are no exception. They seem to be treated like legitimate military targets when there's numerous violations of international law. And yeah, as I've said, it's the starvation. People are starving to death. It really is. I know this is a phrase which gets used a lot, and possibly emotively, but I think this is as little as it can be used. It's hell on earth.
Yeah, it's indeed a tragedy. But do you believe that there's enough international pressure to hold violators accountable?
I think there's many governments, such as the South African government, who are doing lots to do this. But the reality is that the main violator of international law, of international human rights law, of international humanitarian law, is mainly they have one key backer, and that's the United States. And I think as long as the White House allow the Netanyahu government to act with impunity to kill civilians at a mass industrial scale, then there's only so much governments can do. But as under international law, to prevent genocide, as the ICJ is investigating, every signatory to the ICJ has a duty to stop genocide in any, or suspected genocide in any way, shape or form, even as a third party. So I think governments might, like my own here in the UK, could be doing a lot more to put pressure on both the Netanyahu government and the White House to ensure that this absolutely historically barbaric level of human rights abuses and violations of international law and war crimes stops immediately.
Yeah, I'm glad that this is the kind of response that you're hoping to get from the international community. But let's then talk about the psychological toll. And I'm talking about these families, particularly looking at children and who have been, uprooted again and again under such traumatic conditions. How is the psychological toll during these conditions, particularly looking at children?
Oh, it's horrendous. It is. It's unimaginable. I suspect that almost every single child living in Gaza now has some form of trauma-induced condition. We did a study, so as well as working in Palestine, we do a lot of work in Syria, and during the escalation in Idlib around 2019, 2020, when there was a lot of crimes being committed against civilians in Idlib, we did a study where we tested displaced people inside Idlib to see if they had symptoms of PTSD, and we found that 98% of people we spoke to had symptoms compatible with PTSD, but when it came to under 18s, children, it was 100%. And what happened in Idlib in Syria was brutal and shouldn't be downplayed. And it is comparable to what's going on in Gaza, but what's happening in Gaza is happening on a much larger scale. So I would say, in my experience, that if almost every single child and almost every single adult in Gaza will be suffering from some form of trauma, some sort of mental health issues, people don't know where safety is. People have been displaced from their homes. Most people have lost family members. Entire families have been wiped out. It's unimaginable that anyone has to cope with this level of war crimes and barbarity, but the reality is 2.1 million people having to cope with it.
Yeah, and that's a huge number. But have your staff and local partners come under, direct threat during these latest developments? Are they safe? What are they saying to you?
Thankfully, almost all of our staff have been displaced multiple times over the past 20, 21 months. Thankfully, we haven't lost any members of staff. We've had, some of our displacement camps have been impacted either indirectly or directly by bombings and gunfire. But we've had hundreds and hundreds of colleagues across the aid sector who have been killed. I think the number's well over 200 now. There was another NGO based in the UK, Human Appeal, has an office 2 kilometres away from us, and their office was targeted the weekend before last, and 3 of their staff were killed. And this is just anecdotal. No one's safe. It's the killing of people in Gaza is indiscriminate. As we've seen, the majority of the death toll, which I believe now is over 59,000 confirmed, the majority of women and children. Aid workers are absolutely not, at best, are not safe. And at worst, we fear we're being actively targeted. We've seen in the Knesset that there's laws being put in place to delegitimize aid agencies working in Gaza. We've seen with the legal attacks on UNRWA that aid workers are being challenged through the legal and political processes. And as we've seen, as I'm sure you remember, a few months ago, people from the World Central Kitchen, numerous people, aid workers, have lost their lives. It's an incredibly dangerous place to exist, whether you're an aid worker or not.
Yeah. So Charles, you speak about the Knesset in Israel. So is there no opposition? Blue and white is not opposing what Likud is doing? Are they agreeing with everything? I know that Likud has got all of these parties, rallying behind it. Is there no opposition with regards to what's happening in Gaza?
I think that's a very good question. I'm by no means an expert in the Israeli political system. But from what I can gather, reading reports, that there is a groundswell and growing disenchantment with what the current administration is doing in Gaza, and I think it's only going to grow because the longer this goes on, the more undeniable that it's not only against international law, but it's against all humanity of what's going on.
Finally, what message would you like to send to those watching this crisis unfold?
I just think, it's very, very easy to feel helpless and hopeless and horrified, and we can ask, what can we do? But I think we can all see what's going on. We can all see with our own eyes, whether it's on social media, whether it's on TV, whether it's on the radio. We all can see what's happening, and whatever we're doing, I don't think there's nothing I can do. We can always do more, and this is going to be a stain on history. This is going to be a stain on humanity. History will not look on what is happening now well, and I think we'll all want to say we spoke up, we engaged with our policymakers, even if it's just sharing on social media, just do whatever we can, say whatever we can, donate to NGOs who have got access to Gaza. Just whatever we're doing, let's do more, because we cannot stand by silently. We cannot do nothing whilst people are being killed on a mass industrial scale in Gaza in 2025.
Charles, thank you for everything you do. Have a beautiful evening ahead.
You too. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, there you have it. Charles Lowley, Director of Communications and Advocacy at Action for Humanity, speaking to us about the worsening displacement crisis in Gaza. That conversation brings us to exactly 21:31 Central African Time. This is Africa World Hour on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
O Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel Africa. Adivinha só, a Channel Africa quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel Africa está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
All right, Doctors Without Borders, also known as MSF, has released the findings on an internal review into the 2021 killings of the 3 of its staff in Ethiopia's Tigray region. The report concludes that the attack was deliberate and raises serious concerns about the lack of accountability. To unpack these findings and what they mean for the safety of humanitarian workers, we're now joined by Raquel Ayora, General Director of MSF Spain. Raquel, thank you so much for making the time. Welcome to Channel Africa.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So briefly take us through the key findings of MSFs and your internal review. How do you conclude that the killings were indeed intentional?
Well, we conducted this review, putting together a lot of information, including forensic analysis of pictures, images, and obviously we had the information of the team that collected the bodies of our colleagues, and as well the evidence of the bodies themselves. So what the first and most important finding is that we know how our colleagues were killed. So they were killed at very short range. They were shot several times. All of them were presenting several gunshot wounds in their bodies. As I was saying, they were shot at very close range, and they were facing their attackers at the moment of being killed. They were wearing their MSF Doctor Without Border jackets, their vests, their white vests with their logos. The car was fully identified as well with the Doctor Without Borders flag. So they were clearly civilians, very clearly identified as humanitarian workers, and in our opinion, killed clearly intentionally. There were no indications of active fighting at the time of the killings, and there was obviously not a mistake. On top of that, what we found out collecting the evidence and the accounts of many of our colleagues and witnesses is that in the weeks before the incident, there was an increase in hostility against humanitarian workers. So our colleagues were having more increasing problems getting across the points and conducting the medical activities and humanitarian activities. They were confronting a lot of hostile reactions by the ENDF troops and their allies. As well, there was a clear hostility in the public speeches of the federal government against the humanitarian workers.
Yeah.
And then there was a difficult moment in the conflict because the ENDF was about to withdraw to retreat from Tigray, and there was a convoy of the ENDF in the vicinity of the place where our colleagues were killed.
Yeah, it seems to me that you have evidence that the killings were indeed intentional. What do you then make of the failure of the parties engaged to respond accordingly to the tragedy?
Well, obviously, this kind of processes of accountability require a lot of political courage, and we know it's not an easy thing, no, to get involved, to conduct a proper investigation and conclude, and share the conclusions of this investigation. We know that it takes a lot of political will to go there. It hasn't happened so far, so we engage with both parties, both the TPLF as well as the federal authorities for 4 years. At some points, we were reassured that there was going to be an investigation. Then we were told that there was an ongoing investigation by the federal authorities, with which investigation we were really willing to collaborate. We made available to them all our findings, our version of this internal report, as well as the evidence that was in our hands. But for longer than 1 year and a half, we haven't had any follow-up meeting with them. We have been requesting meeting them once and again, and we have been met with silence and neglect. So we think that there is no political will to really conduct the investigation and give proper accountability to this case.
Yeah, Raquel, so what do you hope for in releasing the findings of your internal review now? What are the reasons behind releasing it now?
As I was saying, it has been 4 years, and 4 years is a long time for the families, it's a long time for us, and for the humanitarian community as well. No? We think that this is a very important conversation to be had right now. This not only because this case is important for us and for the families, as I was saying, but because there is a growing trend of attacks and killings of humanitarian workers and medical workers across the world, in zones of conflicts and violence. And we think that is the time to really refresh this conversation upon the memory of our case, and ask for this accountability. And this needs to be a building block of a safer environment for humanitarian workers. We feel a sense of urgency to really bring this case and what this case means to the attention of power actors, authorities, states, for them to recommit with the protection of humanitarian workers.
Yeah, and we do know that you're not the only organization losing staff in conflict zones. In your view, what needs to happen then to ensure the protection of humanitarians at all times?
As I was saying, I think that we are going through a process of normalization of the killings of humanitarian workers. So this is happening. We see more and more authorities, parties, senior political members of governments and states just speaking against humanitarian workers and creating the conditions for them to be targeted in the field. We think that there is a need for a recommitment of the states and the armies to the laws of war. We think that the wars need to be regulated, and there is a need to restate and recommit to the protection of humanitarian workers and civilians in zones of conflict.
Yeah, but Raquel, sorry to cut in. Which body do you think will be key and central in making sure that this happens?
It's a matter of the states. Are the states the ones that need to be willing to recommit with those laws? We can resort to the United Nations. We can resort to international justice. We can resort to a number of bodies, normative or legal. But at the end of the day, what we need is a commitment of the states and the governments and the armies to fulfill their obligations in the conduct of military activities and the war.
Yeah, and what impact has this tragedy had on your operations in Ethiopia and other high-risk areas?
Well, obviously, this is a shock, this is a trauma for our organization. While we stay after the killings, we withdrew from Tigray because there was so much uncertainty about the circumstances of the killings that we didn't think that it was a safe environment for us. Obviously, we're hopeful to get this clarification of the circumstances by the hands of the authorities and the parties. So we stay in the country conducting operations for 2 years before deciding to fully withdraw from the country. Whereas there are other members of the Doctors Without Borders movement that are still operating. MSF Spain decided to withdraw in 2023. And it has been a shock for us. Now we had been operating in the Spanish section has been operating in Ethiopia for decades, and it is a country in which we think that we have spared thousands and thousands of patients, and it's a very sad occurrence for us.
Yeah. Now that you released the findings, has there been any reaction from the Ethiopian authorities? And if any, what do you want them to say?
Nothing at all. We haven't heard from them. The day before the release of the report, we went again back to Addis Ababa. We sent them a letter. We tried to release by hand a copy of the report, and we offered ourselves to continue, with the engagement and the conversation. But we haven't heard from them, and we are still willing to engage. We know that this is a bold step on our side to go public after 4 years of trying to get something in bilateral. We hope that they understand that this is not about putting blame. This is about really, it's a moral obligation on our side to really share what we know about what happened to our colleagues, and it's their obligation to continue with the investigation and to either prove us wrong or right and continue and with this investigation that was still ongoing. That was ongoing at least 1 year and a half ago, and make themselves accountable. I think that I hope that this will happen sooner or later, and we are very very willing to keep engaging with.
Yeah, Raquel, just before I let you go, what message do you have then for the families of Maria Tadros and Johannes, and for the aid workers still in the fields? What message do you have for them to encourage them? I know this can be tiring, but what do you have for them?
For the families, we need to give them more than what we have managed to give them so far in terms of accountability. We have done our best, and as I was saying, now it's a matter of the states, and not only the Ethiopian states. I think that's the European Union and other states across the world really need to push for accountability in this kind of cases. This is something that is very much needed for the families. And then for the rest of my colleagues, what they know, and I think that what we have proven is that we don't give up. We think is every time that a colleague is unfortunately wounded or killed in this kind of incidents, we pursue accountability, we pursue the clarification of the circumstances, and we pursue to create a safer environment for our colleagues.
All right, Raquel, thank you so much for making the time, and we wish you all the best with the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right, there you have it. Raquel Ayora, General Director at Doctors Without Borders, also known as MSF.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel África. Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
The president of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, Badea, Dr. Sidi Ould Tah, he is vying for the presidency of the African Development Bank, the AFDB. He positions himself as a fervent defender of economic integration and structural transformation on the African continent.
Well, I do believe that I have a 360 view of the development challenges in the continent with my experience from both the supply side and the demand side. But more importantly, my vision is to bring on board all the stakeholders and to have a holistic approach for the development of the continent and to develop partnership across the continent and outside the continent, bringing all the stakeholders together to work for one goal is to make Africa great for life and livelihood of the African population.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
All right, in the wake of South Africa's ongoing food and mouth disease outbreak, farmers across the country are bearing the brunt of its devastating impact. In an interview with Channel Africa at the National Food and Mouth Disease Indaba in the capital, Pretoria, members of parliament and portfolio committee members on agriculture, Willie Okamp, emphasized the urgency of restoring the country's vaccine production capabilities. Okamp commended Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen and South Africa's Department of Agriculture for their swift response to the crisis, but warned that years of their neglect, particularly at vaccine manufacturing facilities, have left South Africa dangerously reliant on import vaccines. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe spoke with members of parliament and portfolio committee member on agriculture, Willie Okamp. Take a listen.
All farmers are hugely affected by this foot and mouth disease outbreak. We therefore want to thank Minister Steenhuisen as well as the department for hosting this Indaba. I think it is good that we speak with each other. We need to get to solutions now. It is unfortunate that South Africa is now at a place that we have got to import vaccines for foot and mouth disease from our neighboring country, Botswana, where in the past we had a state-of-the-art world-class foot and mouth disease vaccine producing facility. That was neglected over over many years. It wasn't maintained properly. Due to cadre deployment, people were employed in positions that they did not know how to execute. And now we are sitting in a situation where the Agricultural Research Council is not manufacturing foot and mouth disease vaccines anymore. And on the other side, we've got the OBP, Onderstepoort Biological Products, that has also had a lot of trouble with vaccine manufacturing, African horse sickness vaccine, lumpy vaccine. So we need to get those facilities up and running again so that we are self-sufficient when it comes to vaccine manufacturing. I know that the Minister of Agriculture, John Steenhuisen, have asked the Minister of Finance for funding so that we can get money allocated towards our department to put into the re-establishment of these vaccine facilities so that we can really be standing on our own 2 feet there.
How viral has this disease spread across the regions of South Africa?
Well, we saw the first outbreaks in the Eastern Cape. We know about the outbreaks in KZN and some outbreaks in Gauteng and the Northwest. The immediate thing that was done was to have corridors of safety be built around those areas. We saw that vaccines have been imported at an immense rate, 900,000 vaccines that came in and that has been distributed. I spoke to farmers here this morning that said that where they had outbreaks, they could immediately get vaccines same day. So it is clear that the department under the leadership of Minister Steenhuisen is making earnest of this. They are really taking this serious and they are trying to do whatever they can to get to the solutions. We need to listen to the farmers. They've got a lot of knowledge on this. We need to make sure that tracking and tracing of animals are now going to be implemented, because that is one way that we can really curb the spread of diseases, not only foot and mouth disease, but other diseases as well.
Talking about the impact, where have people been affected the most? Is it at the production level, the price increases? Where are we today?
Well, firstly, when you've got foot and mouth disease, you are battling to export your meat. So it will create an overstock for the local market, which might have an effect on prices. It will have an effect on farmers because they can't get money, proper money for their animals. If they can't get money, they will have to have people dismissed because of the fact that they can't afford them anymore. So the whole value chain is affected. The export markets, the farmer, farm workers, the value chain, the truck driver that's driving it to the abattoirs are affected, the butcheries are affected. So it is a real huge impact across the board, across all sectors of the value chain, and that is why we need to address this as soon as possible and get these vaccine manufacturing facilities in South Africa up and running so that we are not reliant on other countries, but that we can go out there and do that ourselves. Our farmers are the best farmers in the world. They know what to do. We, from a point of government, must give them all the support that we can give them from our side.
Does the foot and mouth disease also affect the quality of the meat? Because I know you have said that it affects the exports.
Foot and mouth disease has got no effect on humans. Not at all. It doesn't affect the quality of the meat. The reason why you can't export it is they don't want that to enter other countries. So it is 100% safe for human consumption. We do have some of the best meat in the world in our country. So people out there don't have to worry about that. It is about curbing the spreading of this disease because it will have an effect on the total value chain and export markets for us.
And since yesterday, today I know it's a closing day, how have the deliberations been, and then what sort of solutions are coming to the table so that this issue can be addressed, while also looking at in the future without depending on exporting vaccines? Like you said that there was a bit of a neglect. Previously, vaccines were being manufactured in South Africa.
Yeah, the discussions here have been robust and people have been given the opportunity to say what they want to say. They have now broken up into chat groups, discussion groups, so there are smaller groups, not one big group that like we had yesterday. So people are now in those working groups discussing this, the problems that they experience, coming up with solutions that they propose. So what we need to take out of this is to understand the severity of this and look at industry role players. You've got scientists here, you've got people that did a lot of research, you've got farmers on the ground, you've got farming organizations, you've got the red meat industry of South Africa. We need to listen to everybody. And that is what this Indaba, that is what the word means, is there for, is for us to can get together and discuss this going forward. It cannot be that government alone make decisions on how to go forward.
SABC Sports brings you Chasing the Sun, a powerful 5-part documentary series about the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting 13 July at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2. Tune in every Sunday for the heights and headache and the heroics that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere. No subscription needed. Don't miss it. Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
All right, countries that cling to fossil fuels are not protecting their economies, they are sabotaging them, says the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Guterres delivered a special address on climate change titled A Moment of Opportunity, Supercharging the Clean Energy Age at UN headquarters in New York earlier Tuesday. The UN chief made the case that a renewable future was fundamentally about energy and people security and was a key peg to advancing the Sustainable Development Goals that are currently way to track in terms of implementation. Showing Bryce Peace reports.
Please join me in welcoming the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres.
Guterres told his audience that the world was on the cusp of a new era, one where fossil fuels were running out of road and where the sun was rising on a clean energy age.
Just follow the money. $2 trillion went into clean energy last year. That's 800 billion more than fossil fuels and up almost 70% in 10 years. A new data released today from the International Renewable Energy Agency shows that solar, not so long ago 4 times the cost of fossil fuels, is now 41% cheaper. Offshore wind, 53%. And over 90% of new renewables worldwide produced electricity for less than the cheapest new fossil fuel alternative. This is not just a shift in power. This is a shift in possibility.
His speech coinciding with the release of a special report titled Seizing the Moment of Opportunity, which highlights the benefits and actions needed to accelerate a just transition globally. Among the benefits, market economics.
In many advanced economies, emissions have peaked, but growth continues. In 2023 alone, clean energy sectors drove 10% of global GDP growth. In India, 5%. The United States, 6%. China, a leader in the energy transition, 20%. And in the European Union, nearly 33%. And clean energy sector jobs now outnumber fossil fuel jobs, employing almost 35 million people worldwide.
The Secretary-General urged action in 6 opportunity areas by using national climate plans to go all out on the energy transition, urging clarity and certainty and leadership from G20 countries, building energy systems of the 21st century with investments in the right infrastructure, meeting the world's surging energy demand sustainably, including for energy-hungry data centers on which an AI future depends. A just energy transition, arguing for a clean energy era that must deliver equity, dignity, and opportunity for all, using trade and investment to support climate policy while unleashing the full force of finance and driving investment to markets with massive potential.
Africa is home to 60% of the world's best solar resources, but it received just 2% of global clean energy investments last year. Today, developing countries pay outlandish sums for both debt and equity financing, in part because of outdated risk models, bias, and broken assumptions that boost the cost of capital. Credit rating agencies and investors must modernize. We need a new approach to risk that reflects the promise of clean energy, the rising cost of climate chaos, and the danger of stranded fossil fuel assets.
Making the case for the reforms that would drive a future that is not only green, but just.
The clean energy future is no longer a promise, it's a fact. No government, no industry, no special interest can stop it. Of course, the fossil fuel lobby of some fossil fuel companies will try, and we know the lengths to which they will go. But I have never been more confident that they will fail, because we have passed the point of no return.
In a question and answer session that followed his remarks, the SG was asked why he chose to use this platform to focus on climate change rather than other crises like wars and conflicts that may feel more immediate or urgent. His response: that this was the right moment for a new offensive in bringing the urgency of climate change to the global public, as governments now take decisions that will determine their national climate plans, or NDCs, that are to be presented at the UN Climate Change Conference, or COP30, in Brazil in November this year. In an effort to ensure that those NDCs have the right measures to make COP30 the success this planet needs it to be. I'm Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York.
That report by Sherwin brings us to 21:59 Central African Time. If you've missed anything, you can follow us on social media. At X, we are at Channel Africa 1, or on Facebook, Channel Africa, on Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on TikTok at Channel Africa 1, and of course on YouTube, we're at Channel Africa 1. Well, that's my lot on Africa World Hour on Channel Africa, the African perspective. From myself, Innocent Semosa, on behalf of the team behind the scenes, it's goodbye and God bless.